Take her to the throne room. I want to hear the truth from the Omega everyone already decided to condemn. The Alpha King's voice silenced the entire market square. Clara Whitmore stood frozen in the center of Silver Hollow's royal district, holding a simple loaf of bread in her hands while hundreds of pack members watched her like she had already been judged. The accusation was small. The consequences were not. A missing loaf from the royal bakery, 3 silver coins worth of bread, and somehow, it had become a reason to drag a young Omega before the most powerful Alpha in the region. Clara looked around at the faces staring back at her. Some were curious. Some were disappointed. Most had already made up their minds. I did not steal it, she said calmly. The guard beside her cleared his throat. The bread was found with your belongings. Clara lowered her eyes for 1 second, not because she was afraid, but because she was trying to understand how quickly a lie could become the truth when everyone wanted it to be. Then the crowd parted. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood stepped forward. He wore a dark royal coat with silver markings of the Silver Hollow pack, every detail showing the weight of the throne he carried. He was known for making decisions without hesitation. A king who valued order. A leader who believed emotions could not stand above duty. But the moment Ethan looked at Clara, something inside the room changed. His wolf stirred. Not with anger. With recognition. A strange silence passed between them. Clara felt it too. A pull she could not explain, like a forgotten song she had somehow always known. She quickly pushed the feeling aside. Your Majesty, Clara said, lowering her head slightly. I know what this looks like, but I am not guilty. Ethan studied her carefully. Most people lowered their eyes when facing him. Clara did not. She was respectful, but she was not broken. That caught his attention. Everyone says the same thing when they are accused, Ethan replied. Clara looked directly at him. Then perhaps the problem is not that everyone lies. Perhaps the problem is that no one listens. A few whispers moved through the crowd. No one spoke to the Alpha King like that. Ethan's expression remained controlled, but his wolf reacted again. Behind him, Folan, his royal wolf companion, stepped forward and watched Clara closely. The great wolf did not growl. He did not threaten her. He simply stood beside her, as if silently questioning the accusation. Ethan noticed. So did everyone else. Interesting. Mason Caldwell, the beta commander, quietly said. Fun rarely trusts strangers. Ethan glanced at the evidence. The bread, the wrapping, the report from the royal kitchen. Everything pointed toward Clara. Yet something about the situation felt wrong. Because Clara was not acting like someone hiding a crime. She was acting like someone waiting for the truth to finally be seen. You will come with me, Ethan said. Not as a prisoner. As someone who will explain what happened. Clara nodded. Then I hope you are prepared to hear something that changes your opinion of me. As the gates of the royal hall opened, Clara walked beside the Alpha King who believed he was investigating a theft. He did not know he was about to uncover a secret buried inside his own pack. And he certainly did not know the Omega standing beside him would become the one person capable of changing everything he thought he understood about loyalty, trust, and the bond between two souls destined to meet. The royal hall had never felt so quiet. Clara Whitmore stood beneath the towering silver banners of Silver Hollow Pack, surrounded by ancient symbols of Alpha leadership and generations of tradition. She was no longer standing in the middle of a market crowd. She was standing in front of the one person who could decide whether her name would be remembered with respect or shame. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood sat at the end of the long stone table, studying every detail of the report placed before him. The evidence says you were near the royal bakery before dawn, Ethan said. The missing bread was found with your personal belongings. Help me understand why. Clara looked at the documents, then back at him. Because someone wanted it to be found there. The answer was simple. Too simple for a room filled with people who believed the matter was already solved. One of the council members, Lord Adrian Valecrest, leaned forward. Your Majesty, with respect, this is exactly why lower-ranked Omegas should not be allowed near royal supplies. Compassion cannot replace responsibility. Clara felt the old familiar weight of those words. Not because she had heard them once. Because she had heard them her entire life. She was an Omega. She was from the outer district. She baked bread, delivered supplies, and helped families who could not afford royal prices. To people like Lord Valecrest, that meant she belonged at the edge of the room, not the center. You have mistaken my position for my value, Clara said quietly. The room went still. Ethan looked at her. Most people would have apologized after speaking against a council member. Clara simply stood there, calm and certain. That was not arrogance. It was something else. Strength. Ethan glanced toward Fun, his royal wolf companion. The wolf had been watching Clara since she entered the hall. He was still watching her now. Fun does not usually react to strangers this way, Mason Caldwell said. Ethan gave his beta commander a brief look. What exactly are you suggesting? Mason folded his arms. I am suggesting that the wolf who has guarded this pack for 12 years seems less convinced of her guilt than the council. Ethan did not answer. He looked back at Clara. Tell me what happened. Clara took a slow breath. I delivered bread to the eastern shelters yesterday evening. After that, I returned home. Someone entered my room while I was gone. You are certain? Ethan asked. Yes. How? For the first time, Clara hesitated. She looked at the wrapped bread sitting on the table. Because I know things about objects that most people do not. The council members exchanged confused looks. Ethan leaned slightly forward. Explain. Clara placed her hand near the wrapping, not touching it yet. Sometimes objects keep pieces of what happens around them. Feelings. Moments. Small traces of the truth. A few people quietly laughed. Lord Veilcrest shook his head. A convenient story. Before Clara could respond, Finn stepped closer to the table and lowered his head toward the bread. The wolf became completely still. Ethan noticed immediately. His expression changed. Because Finn was not reacting to Clara, he was reacting to the evidence. Let her try, Ethan said. The command surprised everyone, including Clara. She carefully touched the wrapping. For a moment, the entire room disappeared. She felt panic. Hurry. A hand that was not hers. Someone whispering that the Alpha King would believe the evidence before he believed in Omega. Clara opened her eyes. Ethan was watching her carefully. What did you see? He asked. Clara looked around the room and realized something important. For the first time since the accusation began, someone with power was actually waiting for her answer. I saw the truth, she said. And it was never about stealing bread. Clara Whitmore had spent her entire life learning one simple rule about power. Powerful people rarely listen to people like her. That was why the silence inside the royal hall felt so unusual. Alpha King Ethan Blackwood was not dismissing her. He was waiting. The entire council watched as Clara stood beside the evidence table, knowing that every word she spoke could decide what happened next. You said someone entered your room, Ethan said. Can you prove it? Clara looked at the bread wrapping in front of her. Not with ordinary evidence. Lord Adrian Veilcrest gave a quiet laugh. Of course, we have moved from stolen bread to invisible stories. Clara ignored him. She had learned long ago that some people laughed when they were uncomfortable with something they could not control. She placed her fingers lightly against the paper wrapping. The moment she touched it, the room faded away. She did not see a face. She did not hear a name. Instead, she felt emotions left behind. Nervousness. Confidence. A person who believed they could never be caught. She felt the image of a hand folding the paper carefully. Not rushed. Not careless. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Then came a thought that was not her own. The Alpha King will believe the evidence before he believes in Omega. Clara pulled her hand away. Her breath caught slightly. Ethan noticed. What did you find? He asked. Clara looked at him. Someone wanted you to judge me before you knew the truth. The words landed harder than she expected. Ethan remained calm, but something changed in his eyes. Because that was exactly what had happened. He had seen the report. He had seen the evidence. But he had not seen Clara. Not until now. Mason Caldwell stepped closer. Your Majesty, if someone planted the evidence, then the question is why? To create distrust, Clara answered. Everyone looked at her. Between who? Ethan asked. Between you and the people you rule. She pointed toward the bread. This was not stolen because someone wanted food. It was chosen because it was simple. Something small enough that nobody would question it. Something that would make an Omega like me look desperate. The room became quiet again. Ethan looked toward the council members. Many avoided his gaze. That alone told him something. Search the bakery records, Ethan ordered. Find out who had access before dawn. Lord Veilcrest immediately stood. Your Majesty, are we really allowing a stranger to challenge the council based on a feeling? Clara turned toward him. Not a feeling. A memory. Before Veilcrest could respond, Finn moved beside Clara. The royal wolf lowered his head and watched the council member carefully. Ethan noticed the reaction. Finn had protected Silver Hollow Pack for years. He had never shown trust easily. Interesting, Ethan said quietly. Veilcrest's expression tightened. A wolf's reaction is not proof. No, Ethan replied. But neither is an accusation. It was the first time Clara heard the Alpha King challenge his own counsel in her defense. It should not have mattered. She reminded herself of that. He was still the man who allowed the accusation to reach his throne. He was still the leader of the pack that judged her before hearing her voice. Yet when their eyes met again, that strange connection returned. The mate bond neither of them wanted to acknowledge. It was not overwhelming. It was not a command. It was simply there. A quiet reminder that something between them had begun before either of them understood it. Clara looked away first. She refused to let destiny decide who she was. Ethan watched her carefully. For the first time in years, his wolf was not warning him about danger. It was asking him to pay attention. And somewhere inside the palace, someone who had planted the evidence realized the Alpha King was no longer investigating in Omega. He was searching for the person who had tried to deceive him. The next morning, Silver Hollow Palace felt different. Not because anything had changed on the surface. The guards still stood at every entrance. The council still gathered in the same grand chamber. The royal banners still hung above the stone halls. But something had shifted. The Alpha King was no longer accepting the easiest answer. And everyone noticed. Clara Whitmore stood inside the royal archive with Mason Caldwell, reviewing old supply records from the royal bakery. She still could not believe she was there. A few days ago, she was just another Omega from the Eastern District. Now she was investigating a secret inside the heart of the pack. You understand most people would be nervous right now, Mason said, looking through a stack of documents. Clara raised an eyebrow. I was accused of stealing from the royal family in front of half the pack. I think I used up most of my nervousness already. Mason almost smiled. You really do talk to everyone the same way. Should I talk differently because someone wears a crown? She asked. No, that might be exactly why the king is listening. Clara paused. She did not want to admit that Ethan Blackwood listening to her mattered. The Alpha King was still the man who had allowed doubt to fall on her first. Trust was not something that appeared because of a strange connection or a mate bond. Trust had to be earned. Outside the archive doors, Ethan stood silently for a moment before entering. He had heard enough to understand that Clara was different from everyone around him. Most people wanted something from the throne. Influence, protection, status. Clara wanted something much simpler. She wanted the truth. Any progress? Ethan asked. Clara turned. The bakery records were changed. Mason handed him a document. Someone removed the original delivery list and replaced it with a copy. Ethan scanned the page. Who had access? That is the problem, Mason replied. The person knew royal procedures. They knew where the records were kept. They knew how to make the evidence point toward Clara. Ethan's expression hardened. Not with anger. With disappointment. Someone inside his own pack had used his laws as a weapon. Clara noticed the change in him. For a moment, she saw something beneath the title. Not the Alpha King. Not the ruler everyone feared. Just a man realizing the system he trusted could fail people. You are blaming yourself, Clara said quietly. Ethan looked at her. I am responsible for this pack. Responsible does not mean you control every mistake someone else makes. The word surprised him. People usually told Ethan what he wanted to hear. Clara told him what he needed to hear. Fawn, resting near the doorway, lifted his head and watched them both. The wolf seemed almost amused by the conversation. Your wolf agrees with her, Mason said. Ethan glanced at Fawn. My wolf has become unusually interested in this situation. Clara looked at Fawn. Maybe he just has better judgment than everyone else. For the first time, Ethan almost smiled. It was brief. So brief that most people would have missed it. Clara did not. And somehow that small moment felt more important than any grand royal gesture. But the investigation was far from over. That afternoon, they discovered something hidden beneath the bakery records. A second list of supplies. A private order. A name attached to the request that changed everything. Vivian Ashford. A respected noble Omega from one of Silver Hollow's oldest families. Someone close enough to the royal court to understand how power worked. Ethan stared at the name in silence. Are you certain? He asked. Clara nodded. The truth does not care who someone is. Outside the palace, whispers began spreading through the pack. The Omega accused of stealing was no longer the center of suspicion. Now everyone wanted to know one thing. Why would someone with status and influence try to destroy a woman with nothing to lose? And for the first time, Clara realized the danger was not proving her innocence. The real challenge was uncovering how deep the betrayal inside Silver Hollow truly went. The name Vivian Ashford changed everything inside Silver Hollow Palace. Not because she was feared, not because she was the strongest person in the room, but because everyone knew her. Vivian was not an outsider. She was part of the royal circle. She attended pack ceremonies, advised noble families, and stood among the people who claimed to protect the traditions of the Alpha Throne. Clara Whitmore stared at the document in her hands, feeling the weight of what it meant. Are you sure this is connected to her? Ethan Blackwood asked. His voice was calm, but Clara noticed the tension behind his words. The Alpha King had learned to hide his emotions from the entire pack, but she was beginning to notice the small things. The way his hand tightened around a report. The way his wolf became restless when something threatened the truth. The record was changed using a royal seal, Clara said. The person who did this knew exactly how the palace works. Ethan looked toward Mason Caldwell. Can you confirm it? Mason nodded slowly. The seal matches a request approved through the Noble Council. But there is something strange. The order was created 3 days before the bread went missing. Clara looked confused. 3 days before? Yes, Mason replied. Which means the missing bread was not the plan. It was only the opportunity. The room became silent. This was no longer about a stolen loaf of bread. Someone had created a situation where an innocent Omega would become the perfect target. Someone wanted the pack to see Clara as guilty before anyone asked questions. Ethan walked toward the window overlooking Silver Hollow. For years, he had believed his greatest duty was protecting the pack from enemies outside their borders. He never expected the greatest threat would come from people standing beside him during council meetings. I should have seen it sooner, Ethan said quietly. Clara watched him. You are doing it again. He turned. Doing what? Taking responsibility for everything. For a moment, Ethan looked almost surprised. No one spoke to him that way. Not because they were afraid of him. Because they had forgotten he was still a person. An Alpha King cannot ignore failure, he said. Clara shook her head. No. But an Alpha King who refuses to admit mistakes will never learn from them. The words stayed between them. Ethan had spent his life surrounded by people who praised his strength. Clara was the first person who challenged his thinking without trying to challenge his authority. That difference mattered. Later that evening, Ethan found Clara alone in the palace garden, sitting near the old stone fountain. The moonlight reflected across the water as Finn rested nearby. You should be careful, Ethan said. Clara looked up. That sounds like a warning. It is. From the Alpha King? She asked. From someone who knows how dangerous the council can become when they feel threatened. Clara looked away for a moment. I am used to people deciding what I am worth before knowing me. Ethan was quiet. That should not be normal. Her expression softened slightly. No, it should not. The bond between them was still there. A quiet connection neither of them fully understood. But Clara refused to let it replace trust. Ethan, she said, using his name for the first time, whatever this bond is, it does not erase what happened. He nodded. I know. There was no argument. No demand. Just acceptance. And that surprised her more than anything. The next morning, the pack received unexpected news. Vivian Ashford had requested a private meeting with the Alpha King. She claimed she wanted to explain everything. But before Ethan could respond, Finn reacted to the message. The royal wolf stood, looked toward the palace gates, and gave a low warning sound. Clara noticed immediately. He does not believe her. Ethan looked at the wolf, then at Clara. For the first time, he realized something important. The person he had once considered a suspect was becoming the person he trusted most. But trust came with a cost. Because if Clara was right, exposing the truth would not only destroy Vivian Ashford's reputation, it could reveal a betrayal that reached the highest levels of Silver Hollow leadership. The private meeting with Vivian Ashford was supposed to happen behind closed doors. No council members, no guards, no public attention. But by the time the Alpha King entered the Eastern Chamber, half of Silver Hollow already knew something important was happening. Secrets rarely stayed hidden inside a pack built on power and tradition. Clara Whitmore stood beside Mason Caldwell near the doorway, watching Ethan Blackwood carefully. She could see the conflict on his face. Vivian was not just another suspect. She was someone his pack respected. someone who had spent years standing near the throne. You do not have to be here, Ethan told Clara quietly. Clara looked at him. If the truth is in that room, then I should hear it. Ethan studied her for a moment. Months ago, an Omega speaking to him this directly would have been impossible. Now he simply nodded. Inside the chamber, Vivian Ashford waited with perfect confidence. She wore the calm expression of someone who believed she still controlled the situation. Your Majesty, she said, I understand there has been a misunderstanding. Ethan did not sit. A royal seal was used to change records connected to the bakery incident. Vivian smiled slightly. And you believe I did that? I believe someone did, Ethan replied. The evidence is being reviewed. Clara noticed the change in Vivian's expression when she entered. It lasted less than a second. Surprise. Then control returned. But it was enough. You were involved, Clara said. Vivian looked at her. Careful, Omega. Accusations are dangerous when you cannot prove them. Clara remained calm. So is using someone's status to silence them. The room became tense. Ethan looked between them. He had seen countless political arguments in his years as Alpha King. But this was different. Clara was not fighting for influence. She was fighting because she believed the truth mattered. Vivian stepped closer to the table. Your Majesty, you cannot allow emotions to cloud your judgment. This Omega has created a connection with you, and now she believes that gives her power. The words were carefully chosen. A direct attack, not against Clara's evidence, against her character. Ethan's expression changed immediately. Enough. The single word carried the authority of the Alpha King. But Clara noticed something important. He was not defending her because of the mate bond. He was defending fairness. Clara's position has nothing to do with this investigation, Ethan said. Her evidence stands on its own. Vivian looked surprised. She expected him to hesitate. She expected him to protect the traditions of the old council. Instead, he chose the truth. Later that evening, Clara walked through the palace gardens with Finn following beside her. The quiet felt strange after the tension of the day. You know she was trying to separate us, Clara said. Finn looked at her as if the answer was obvious. Clara sighed. I know. I just do not want this bond to become another reason people underestimate me. A familiar voice came from behind her. It will not. Clara turned. Ethan stood near the garden path. No crown, no council, no symbol of power. Just Ethan. I heard what she said, Clara replied. And he asked. Clara looked away. And I have spent my whole life proving that I am more than what people expect from an Omega. Ethan nodded slowly. Then I will make sure no one in this pack forgets it. The words should have sounded like a royal promise. Instead, they sounded personal. Before Clara could answer, Mason arrived with urgent news. The investigation had uncovered something worse. The altered bakery records were only one part of the plan. Someone had been secretly changing old pack documents for years. Someone had been building a false story about certain Omegas inside Silver Hollow. Clara felt a cold realization settle in. The stolen bread was never the real crime. It was only the first step. And now the person behind it knew the Alpha King was no longer alone in searching for the truth. The truth hidden inside Silver Hollow Pack was much bigger than anyone expected. What started as a missing loaf of bread had become a secret buried beneath years of carefully controlled information. Clara Whitmore stood inside the Royal Archive, surrounded by old records, forgotten documents, and the quiet weight of a history that someone had tried to rewrite. How many files were changed? Ethan Blackwood asked. Mason Caldwell placed another stack of documents on the table. At least 12. Different years. Different departments. But the pattern is the same. Clara looked closer. They all involve Omegas. The room went silent. Ethan picked up one of the records. His expression changed as he read the details. These were not random mistakes. These were decisions. Small changes in records. Missing names. Altered reports. Situations where certain Omegas lost opportunities, positions, or protection from the pack. Someone has been controlling who gets heard, Clara said quietly. Ethan looked at her. He knew exactly what she meant, because that was what almost happened to her. This pack was built on loyalty, Ethan said. But loyalty without fairness becomes something else. Clara studied him carefully. She could hear the disappointment in his voice. Not just disappointment toward others, toward himself. For the first time, she saw how heavy leadership truly was. Being Alpha King was not only about making decisions. It was about carrying the consequences when those decisions failed people. You cannot fix everything in one day, Clara said. Ethan looked at her. You believe that. I know that. She gave a small smile. I spend my life fixing things people thought were already ruined. For a moment, the tension in the room disappeared. Ethan almost smiled again. It was becoming something Clara noticed more often. A small change. A softer version of the man everyone else feared. But before either of them could say anything else, the palace bells rang. Not the normal announcement bells. Emergency council gathering. Mason immediately moved toward the door. That is not good. Minutes later, the three of them entered the council chamber. The room was already filled with nobles and pack leaders. Vivian Ashford stood at the center, holding a document. Her expression was calm. Too calm. Your Majesty, she said. Before this investigation goes any further, there is something the pack deserves to know. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Continue. Vivian turned toward Clara. This Omega has gained access to royal records, private meetings, and the trust of the Alpha King in a matter of days. Whispers spread across the room. Clara felt it immediately. The same judgment from the market returned. Different place. Same feeling. Vivian continued. Perhaps the pack should question whether this investigation is about truth or influence. Ethan stepped forward. Enough. But Clara placed a hand slightly forward, stopping him. Not because she wanted to accept the accusation, because she needed to answer it herself. You want them to believe I manipulated the Alpha King, Clara said. But you are afraid of something much simpler. Vivian's expression tightened. And what would that be? Clara looked around the room. That he listened. Silence filled the chamber. Because everyone understood the meaning behind those words. Ethan had always been surrounded by people who wanted his approval. Clara was the first person who challenged him and expected nothing in return. Then Mason stepped forward with the final piece of evidence. We found the original bakery records. Every face turned toward him. And they proved the person who changed the documents used a private council seal. Ethan looked toward the council members. The betrayal was no longer hidden. Someone sitting among them had helped create the lie. The entire room waited for his decision. Clara looked at Ethan and saw the choice in front of him. Protect the old system, or protect the truth. The Alpha King took one step forward. And this time, everyone in Silver Hollow was listening. The council chamber had never been this quiet. Every seat was filled. Every noble family was watching. Every member of Silver Hollow Pack waited to see what the Alpha King would do when the betrayal came from within his own walls. Ethan Blackwood stood at the center of the chamber, holding the original bakery records Mason Caldwell had recovered. The truth was finally in his hands. But truth alone was not enough. A leader had to decide what to do with it. The private council seal used on these records belongs to someone in this room, Ethan said. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it made everyone stop moving. The nobles exchanged uncertain looks. Vivian Ashford remained silent, but Clara noticed something. For the first time, Vivian did not look confident. She looked worried. Your Majesty, one council member said carefully, we should not make accusations without proper review. Ethan looked at him. That is exactly what happened to Clara. The room fell silent again. Clara stood near Mason, watching Ethan. A few days earlier, she had stood in front of him as a stranger accused of stealing. Now he was standing in front of the entire pack, defending the very fairness she had demanded from him. It was not because of the mate bond. It was because he had finally understood what leadership meant. Vivian stepped forward. You are allowing one Omega to influence royal decisions. Clara looked at her. She had heard those words before. Different voices. Different places. The same message. That she was too small to matter. But this time, she did not feel small. No, Clara said. The problem is that you believe an Omega being heard means someone else has lost power. Vivian turned toward her. You think one investigation makes you important? Clara shook her head. No. I think the truth was important before I ever entered this room. Ethan watched Clara carefully. She was not trying to take his place. She was not trying to control the pack. She simply wanted people to stop being punished for someone else's lies. Then Finn moved forward. The royal wolf walked slowly across the chamber and stopped beside Clara. The entire room noticed. Finn had protected Ethan since he became Alpha King. He had stood beside him during difficult decisions, political conflicts, and years of uncertainty. But now the royal wolf was choosing to stand beside the Omega everyone once doubted. Mason looked around the chamber. The evidence is clear. The records were changed. The accusation was created. Ethan turned toward Vivian. Why? For the first time, Vivian looked away. Because Silver Hollow cannot survive if tradition is destroyed. Clara understood then. This was never only about her. Vivian believed the old system was worth protecting, even if innocent people were hurt by it. Tradition is not an excuse for injustice, Ethan said. The words carried through the chamber. A pack is not strong because the powerful are protected. A pack is strong because everyone inside it can trust the laws. The council members lowered their heads. Some accepted the truth. Others looked angry. But no one could deny it anymore. Later that evening, Clara stood alone on the palace balcony overlooking Silver Hollow. The lights of the pack stretched across the valley. Ethan joined her quietly. You changed today, Clara said. He looked surprised. I did. She nodded. Before, you were trying to protect the throne. Today, you protected the people. Ethan looked out over the valley. I spent years thinking being a good alpha meant never making mistakes. He paused. I was wrong. The quiet between them felt different now. Not because of destiny. Not because of a bond neither of them chose. Because of trust they had built. Then Mason arrived with one final message. Vivian had not acted alone. Someone else had helped her. Someone who had access to the oldest records in Silver Hollow. The betrayal was deeper than they thought. And the person behind it had been hiding closer to the throne than anyone imagined. The hidden truth inside Silver Hollow was finally revealed. But the hardest part was not discovering the betrayal. The hardest part was deciding what kind of pack they wanted to become afterward. For generations, the strongest voices in the council had shaped the rules of Silver Hollow. They believed power meant control. They believed tradition mattered more than change. But now, standing before the entire pack, Alpha King Ethan Blackwood understood something he had never fully accepted before. A throne was not a place where someone stood above others. It was a responsibility to stand with them. The final investigation led Mason Caldwell to an old collection of sealed documents beneath the Royal Archive. The records revealed that Vivian Ashford had not created the entire plan alone. Several members of the old council had quietly supported the system that allowed certain voices to disappear. They had protected their influence for years by deciding who deserved opportunities and who did not. Clara Whitmore listened as Ethan announced the findings before the pack. For too long, we allowed status to decide whose words mattered, Ethan said. That ends today. The crowd remained silent. Not because they disagreed. Because they were hearing something they had never expected from an Alpha King. An admission. A promise. A change. Ethan continued. A mistake made by a leader does not disappear because that leader wears a crown. A true leader accepts responsibility and chooses to do better. Clara watched him carefully. She remembered the first day they met. She remembered standing in front of him while everyone believed she was guilty. She remembered how alone she felt. But she also remembered the moment he decided to listen. That moment mattered. Not because he was powerful. Because he was willing to change. After the council members involved in the deception were removed from their positions, Ethan created new rules for pack investigations. Evidence would be reviewed without considering rank. Omega voices would be protected. Every member of Silver Hollow would have the right to be heard before judgment was made. Some people called it a risk. Others called it the beginning of a stronger pack. Weeks later, Clara returned to the Eastern District where her small bakery had always stood. The streets looked the same, but the people looked different. They no longer looked at her as the Omega who had been accused. They looked at her as the woman who reminded the pack that dignity belonged to everyone. Ethan visited her one quiet morning without guards or ceremony. Clara smiled when she saw him. The Alpha King visiting a bakery without an announcement, she teased. Ethan looked around at the shelves of fresh bread. I thought I would try being normal for once. Clara laughed softly. It was a simple moment. No counsel. No accusations. No pressure from the throne. Just two people who had learned something important about each other. Ethan looked at her seriously. I know the mate bond brought us together. But I do not want you to stay because of destiny. Clara met his eyes. Good. Because I would not. A small smile appeared on his face. I know. And that was the difference. Their connection was not built on obligation. It was built on choice. On respect. On two people who saw each other clearly when the rest of the world only saw their titles. Finn rested near the bakery door, watching them with the quiet satisfaction of a wolf who had known the truth long before anyone else. Silver Hollow would remember the day an Omega stood before an Alpha King and refuse to be defined by an accusation. They would remember the day a ruler chose humility over pride. Because the strongest leaders are not the ones who never make mistakes. They are the ones brave enough to face the truth, protect those who have less power, and become better because someone dared to challenge them. And sometimes, the person everyone ignores is the one who teaches an entire kingdom how to listen.